Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker and Eric Springer. Good to see you both today.
Great to
Good to
be
see
here.
you, Mikey, and always great to be with Eric. Today's field note is about time. So it's number 1713, and the title is To Get the Most from Your Day. Consider time blocking. And that's a big, to get the most from your day. It's like, I really want to squeeze everything out. Time blocking, that sounds pretty inviting. So we're going to try to make it inviting, and what we've at least committed to is that for the next 15 minutes, this block of time, we are with you, and you're with us, and I'm definitely with these two guys. So I will say, I think it's like since I was very young. I don't know that I was like preteen, but maybe I've just always been drawn to anything that was like, here's how you should organize your day. Now I think there are people like that are weird like me, but I don't know if you guys are. I do know that Mikey is a little bit like this, but Eric, I don't know. I mean, you kind of have been in a lot of chaotic circumstances. Are you kind of a go with the flow, or do you kind of need a regimented system?
I use a system. I think we have to be honest with you. There's if I throw out a couple of table stakes to start the conversation.
Hmm.
The first one is I'm thinking of Ernest Hemingway, right? Time is the thing we have least of, and specifically in coaching scenarios, I could pretty much tell you that's the question I get most. I don't have enough time to do all the things that have to be
Hmm.
done.
Right.
How do I manage this true governance problem that we have of
Hmm.
putting my energy to the places where I can get the most effect and be most efficient? And so it's going to take discipline. That's the X factor. And time is
Yeah.
the thing that you have least of. That is the true high demand, low density resource that you have. And
Yeah.
if throw another overlay on top of that, and I'm thinking of a little bit of Frederick the Great here, right? If I try to defend everything, I defend nothing. If I try to do everything, I'll be weak at the point where I need to be strong. And so we have to prioritize as well.
You say Frederick the Great?
That's where that comes from. Yeah, he was talking
Yeah,
about it
I was
on.
like, I think if I had a bell, that would be our first Frederick the Great quote in 4 years of doing it. Yes, right.
Follow me for. Hey, I've got another one too. So
Yeah,
Thomas Sowell, right? He had a great one, which is that there are no solutions, only trade-offs.
yeah, right.
Everything's going to come at
So
the expense of something else, right?
of something else, yeah. Now, I will say, however you think about time blocks, time chunks, and the field notes sort of built around some of the ideas that, Cal Newport has popularized this phrase around time blocks and time blocking. And I've been reading Cal Newport for, 20 years. And, in fact, he started out writing for students. Like when he was a student, he was publishing books while he was a college student, and was writing for how to be successful in high school. And then as he moved into being a college teacher, and he was still blogging about how to be successful in college. And so he's put his ideas to the test, both in his own life and in like the lives of tens of thousands of people that have engaged it, or maybe more, with his ideas. And I think there's a lot to be drawn here. And in fact, it's we have time modules in our content, in our main playbook for our subscribers. And there's a lot of overlap as you look to the wisdom literature over time, about time. And Mikey, I know you've been in the past, you've used bullet journals and other kinds of ways of tracking to-dos and time. And I know some of that's evolved, and it's evolved for me too, I think, over the last couple of years, particularly since we had Oliver Berkman on one of our community conferences. But where do you stand now, Mikey, in terms of how prescribed you are to the way that you think about blocks of time?
Yeah, I use very specific blocks of times for myself, but I think that if I got knocked on the head and was left unconscious, the main thing that and I didn't have a memory of anything, the main thing I would be disappointed about is how this notion of scheduling time for your to-do list, that you don't think of it as like a list of to-dos, but actually scheduling those things out. I was late
Hmm.
to the game in that.
Hmm.
Since I started doing that, it's absolutely been a game changer for me. So in terms of like how the actual schedule works and whether time blocking is super effective for me or not,
Hmm.
I have a variation of it that I use, and I wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
prescribe it to one. But this one thing that I would absolutely tell people is this notion of scheduling out to dos. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
I'd be really disappointed if my amnesiaed self didn't recover that piece of information.
Well, if we knocked Eric on the head and let's say he just passed out and we looked at his schedule, some people have said that your calendar is really an expression of your values. So how much, Eric, do you see the sort of what might just seem procedural of just being like, okay, 2 o'clock to 3:30, I'm going to do this, as more of an expression of a real sort of not only a philosophy about time, but a philosophy about life?
Yeah, I agree with that. I would, play into that saying that, if you looked at my schedule, and obviously my assistant does that, and she gets a bit of a kick out of it because I name things in a way that's uniquely me, because it drives me to do certain things that I know are important, right? So if you look at my first block on my calendar, it's actually going to say beast mode. What am I doing? I'm working out, right?
Yeah.
But I'm talking. Yeah. That's me talking to me. It's that's what I'm trying to do during that time period. I'm trying to touch that rock, that big rock, and put that in the jar.
Well, by the way, that's not an insignificant thing. I know other thinkers have said that you can kind of put an avatar to different modes that you have during the day, and sort of embodying that and kind of giving a name to it. Sometimes is very empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think part of this too is you have to know when you're most attuned to do certain kinds of work. Some people, for me, for example, in the morning is when great coaching conversations happen. That's when great decisions usually happen. And in the afternoon, maybe there's a little bit of more deep work. There's more innovation. That's where I let my mind wander. Obviously, glycogen has kind of started to deplete a little bit towards the end of the day. And so a block that I have at the end of the day is called unproductive productive time. And that's I'm shackled technology. I've turned everything off, and I'm just sitting there with a notebook and a pen, and I'm just writing. And I'm trying to think because obviously where great ideas come from isn't from the continuous interaction. It's from when you let your mind wander and you explore.
For sure, yeah.
So we honestly
schedule that time. Yeah, like that's a priority rather than letting it just happen to drift in or out.
Yeah, right. 100%. And to be honest with you, I use this little timer. I sit there and say, for this time period, you are going to be doing nothing but that. And it's just my ability to focus and to cut out the noise and the distractions during that time period.
Can we talk a little bit about decision fatigue? Your awareness of whether or not decision fatigue really affects you or not. Does that show up in the way that you time block your schedule?
I would say so. I think we made a key point in the field note about pre-deciding certain things, right? And obviously preserving some of that decision-making power. So there's certain things that, hey, I'm going to do this the night before, just so I can preserve some of that glycogen for the more important things the next day. And then I have to know that, okay, if I know that I'm best for a certain kind of work at a certain time, and somebody wants to do that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I say, hey, can we do it tomorrow at 10 o'clock instead? Because I know I'm better for that kind of, and I'm pushing things towards where I'm more effective for it. And scheduling is a huge component of that for sure.
Well, one of the things that is part of the tally of these days of our lives is this idea of deep work that Cal Newport has also underlined, and it's referenced in the field note today. And I think that's in some ways, one of his great contributions. Some of his early work was like just helping you kind of focus on, well, what is the thing you're actually going to do in your life? And the idea of being a real craftsman in the thing that you're trying to develop and not just kind of following your passion. And so then if you're becoming a craftsman and then you're kind of building your days around what that looks like, the idea of deep work is the thing that is harder and harder for all of us. And I think he was writing even before the internet had fully exploded into distraction mode around, he would just keep a kind of a check mark for every hour that counted as true focused deep work. And gosh, if most of us could get to 1 hour of that a day, it'd be great. Right. And I think Cal was getting in sometimes 4, 5, 6 or more, all in a frame of mind where while he was in college and doing his master's and Ivy League PhD and all of these things, he was done with his education by, I think, like 5:30 in the afternoon. So when everybody else in these high pressure environments were kind of, pulling all-nighters and going to the library, he had to pretend that he was studying so that he could go just have pizza with his girlfriend, because he was so diligent in just saying, I'm getting done the work that needs to get done and having this shutdown routine at the end of the day. I'm done for today. I've actually, like, my block of time in the evening for social, exercise, other things is just as important as these other things. And a lot of us don't think of it that way. We think about, like, how can I schedule myself from the moment I wake up to the moment I fall asleep to be productive. And then that's a recipe for not being productive.
I really like the way that he talks about deep work as opposed to framing it with the word flow state, because flow state gives you the impression that there's some kind of trance that you're going to enter into.
Something mystical. Yeah, right.
Where you lose track of time. And so people will actually pursue this state of being instead of actually getting work done. Whereas you may enter into flow state while you're doing deep work, but you're kind of after a different goal there. And so I think the framing of that is important. Flow state may be a little bit of a distraction for us.
There's another interesting concept that comes out in his book on deep work, and it's I don't think it originated from him, but he speaks to it. It's attention residue, and so, you know, if you're going meeting to meeting to meeting, there's an attention residue that happens where I'm going into the next meeting, and the first part of that next meeting, I'm not even thinking about what's going on there. I'm thinking about what happened in the last meeting, and so we'll talk about managing this by bifurcating this time and creating a bit of margin to, okay, let me reflect my notes, capture the main points I wanted to hear, and then let me prepare myself for what's going to happen in this next engagement and what I want to get out of that. And so if you're doing it right, you're scheduling even this little block to prevent attention residue, even between engagements.
Yeah.
Even in
and you guys are not helping because I've been here editing video for the Admired Leadership, subscribers and platform participants. And so I'm in deep work with Jesse, our editor. And then, okay, I got to go do Lead Better. And I come over here and now I got to go back in. And I kind of use the analogy that Donald Miller uses of the scuba diver who goes all the way down and is connected to that tube in the old fashioned way that we would think of the air coming into the big metal suit. And like, you get all the way down there, you get oriented, you get fixed, you find, oh, there's some really nice fish, let's concentrate. And then somebody's like, hey, can you come back up to the surface? And you go, okay, I got to come up and I don't want to get the bends. And I get up there and I get all the way back up and like, what did you, oh, you just needed me to sign that thing? Okay, now I got to go all the way back down. And it's very much like that. Like when every time you get yanked out of deepness, it takes a long time to kind of get back to deepness. And so you have to protect that time so that when you're actually there, you can get stuff done.
One of the ways that was taught to me many years ago, and I didn't quite understand it or grasp it entirely until I was much older, but I got told, go to work early and come home early. And I said, okay, I understand this go to work early piece, especially as a leader. That's the first thing I'm supposed to be the person there making things happen. But what's this come home early piece? And the realization is that if I go to work early, and this is not me telling everybody to be part of the Robin Sharma 5 a.m. club, but if I go to work early and I start doing hitting my big rocks and also attacking some of the bureaucratic administrative things that derail me through the day, and if I do those things up front, I'll be able to go home in time to have a meal with the family, help out with the homework, put the kids to bed, and do those kind of things. And so the objective here is effectiveness for sure, but it's also harmony. And I like that a whole lot better than balance. Balance, puts you in mind of the scale where something's either on or it's off. And really what we're talking about is yin and yang, where things are maybe it's a flow state, Mikey, but things are flowing and I'm rejuvenated to start on that process every single day. Now, I'll admit that I've gotten this wrong many times in my life. Kind of, the example that you're talking about. Sometimes it was just go time, and I had completely lost the harmony in things. But that's the objective: is to go to work early and to come home early. And to Newport's point of this bifurcation once again of, okay, let me put a bow on the day and then go home and have this next experience, and so that I'm not halfway in and halfway out in both places of both work and home.
And Mikey, you've heard me talk about, is it a to-do list or a to-who list? How can we keep like the idea of the relationships and the things that matter most at a higher level than did I just check the box on this task? So how do you actually apply that into the time blocking so that it's not just chores, but you're also prioritizing the human connections throughout the day?
I think there needs to be an hour a day maybe that is specifically focused on relationship building, right? And that way you have the ability to get your tracking list or the people that you're actually wanting to be able to have a growing reciprocal relationship with. There's time dedicated for it. And so maybe in that hour a day, you only hit 4 people. Maybe some days of the week you are able to get 8 or 12 in there with some kind of something, right? But if you don't have a dedicated hour for something like that, you can lose track of relationships pretty quickly. And so having a certain block that is dedicated to the idea of relationship building is important there. How do you end up doing it, Scott?
Well, one of the ways that it comes to my mind, and I know we're not being very good about our block because we're actually drifting past our 15 minutes, but hang with us here. One of the things you and I have liked, Mikey, is Matthew Dick's book on storytelling and around how his idea of having his part of his homework for life is that any day and every day you kind of think, well, what is the one story I would tell from today? Like, what would be the thing that really stands out that if I had to turn it into a story, that this would be the story I'd tell? Now, too often, if you're saying, well, what's the most important thing that happened today? You're going to go right to the task. I wrote this thing, I did that thing. Well, actually, maybe the most important thing you do most days is the conversation you had, or you spent that time on Zoom with somebody you hadn't had a real chance to debrief with, or it's the time that you spent, reading with one of your kids. But very often, the meetings that I'll have throughout the day for work are conversational sort of progress towards goals and understanding that are harder to quantify. You can't just put a bow on that and say, that was that thing, right? And so those are, by trying to kind of think about that each day as like, it's not the thing that I did, but it's like with the conversations that I had and where did my thinking go because of that? So I think about that. And then I just, in general, I also kind of go back to Naval and some others who are like, don't like to have a schedule. I like my day to be totally free. And they get a tremendous amount done, right? Now they're kind of in that unstructured space, but they're not undisciplined. And so in his mind, it's kind of like, it's, the lion lays under the tree in the shade and explodes occasionally, and then goes back and sits under the tree and thinks a long time, right? Yeah. So that's where Oliver Burkeman, I think, has been helpful in saying, look, the river keeps coming along. You're never going to get to inbox zero. You're never going to get, if you actually get more chores done, they're just going to give you more chores than anybody else. So you just kind of have to say, what's the way that I actually want to go about creating good things in the world that are the best use of my craftsmanship, that are helpful to the most people. And if I'm doing that and thinking about it day in, day out, and I have a good general sense of the direction I'm going, mostly good things are going to happen.
Right.
I think the way I think about it, Scott, is there's, for me, an overlapping Venn diagram with one data set being all the things that I care about and I think that matter in this world. And then one data set being all the things I can actually actively impact and influence.
Right.
And I think fulfillment in this sense comes from 2 things: putting my energy first off, right where those things overlap. And then secondly, trying to grow the circle of the things I can influence and impact to take as much of what I think matters. As you've heard me say before, I know there's trash on Mount Everest and I'm not going to clean it up. So
we're worried about it, but we can't do everything in the world. Yeah.
I have to focus on the things that are actually within my span of control. So
Yeah, but you're the kind of guy that one day we're going to find out Eric's off all week because apparently he's climbing Mount Everest to clean some things up, and we'd be like, that sounds about right.
Don't put it past me.
Nice. All right, thanks you both.
Guys.
Good. Appreciate the conversation today.
Good seeing you guys.